See?
There you go.
So it is 12 o'clock. I won't let Guy T start exactly yet, but I will take a couple of housekeeping items here. If you can rename yourself so that we know where you are in the process, that would be helpful. And I am going to do the same right now.
Who did you want me to be this week, Chris?
Um, I don't know. Chief beer drinker at this point.
I can't. I got to go to work here in a little bit.
You really grew that.
Huh.
Quick to tell me he got a new church. I got a new church. Where? So he said, I said, so sure. I said, is everybody coming back to church? He said, yeah,
And then the other thing is,
I said, well, what
you are
well, you can
not
ask her.
asking a question. If you could mute yourself, that would be awesome.
He said, what? They got that insurance money. His mama to ride around a
Can you mute
Mercedes.
Deb Davis, please?
A Mercedes? Well, that was got a Mercedes.
I don't think I can from here.
I did.
Thank you.
Welcome, Don.
Yep.
Thanks, Skip.
There we go. So, and then, okay. So now that we've got able to hear everybody, if you have a question, go ahead and post that. You can either post it in the chat, or if we're at a opening in the conversation, you can unmute your mic and go live mic. We'll hear those questions. We don't have a problem with that. And today we have Guy T. He's going to help us through some important. I haven't talked to him to find out what he wanted to talk about. I think he's going to. We've talked about the manual already, so I'm not sure what else he's going to talk about.
It's true. Is it my turn?
It is your turn. Thanks, Guy T.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and good morning to each and every one of you. Renee's calling in for pizza for all of us. So make mine chicken with a little pepperoni, if you wouldn't mind, Renee. That'd be great. We also should have another guest coming soon from Wisconsin, I hope, because I was just trading Facebook chats with a person who was trying to get in and didn't know the passcode, et cetera. So hopefully we'll have some more folks coming in pretty soon. Deb, you'll have to tell us more about the Mercedes a little bit later on as well. But thank you for muting as well. Let's see, today, before we get into the questions, I am going to go to the sample test like many of us have done, and I'll walk you through some things there. But I was going to open it up for questions first. And Deb, you are usually the best at questions, but that doesn't mean anybody else can't chime in. Suzette, if you got a good question as it relates to the exam or the image submission process, fire away if you wouldn't mind. So let me open it up, and anyone have questions? Andy just joined us, so Andy is also welcome to ask a question that's related to the CPP process if you like. Before I jump in, I can let you guys go first if you had a specific question.
Guy,
Deb
I
is
didn't
on
have
her
a
phone.
specific question. I am trying to get to my computer. I'm on my phone.
Okay.
So,
All right. Well, later on, tell us more about the Mercedes in the chat, okay?
sorry.
And good morning, Andy. Are you a first-time caller, long-time listener?
I'm neither. I am a first-time caller, not I'm a long-time listener in the sense that I've been a candidate for longer than I want to admit.
Okay.
And it's time to get going. And I saw this on the feed this morning. Somebody the other day in my local Massachusetts chapter told me about this group, and it's time to get going.
Well, glad to have you here, sir. So tell us more about when did you sign up, or tell us about your pursuit that you were just describing a little bit there. How long have you been doing this?
I mean, the pursuit is, it was a personal goal. It's not something that I think is particularly required for what I do. A lot of what I do is B2B work. Mm-hmm. But it's a personal quest, and I signed up a while ago. I got the COVID extension. It's, I just got to do it.
Okay.
None of it's.
And where are you in the process?
I've got a good study guide. I've done a bunch of the practice tests. I just have to get back to it because I put it down again. And I know there's some topics for stuff that seems pretty arcane to me in the content that I got to get, up on, in spite of the fact I'll probably never use it.
Okay. Well, you'll be surprised. If you're like most folks, and I'm going to raise my hand, the rest of the gang can raise their hand. Those of you who've already passed, you're going to be surprised how much you do wind up using. Every once in a while you'll find yourself in front of a customer and going, oh yeah, click, click, click. And, it just all the bulbs start popping off in your head going, I know that answer. And I'm sure you read some of the stuff on the PPA site. It talks about instilling confidence, possibly changing your prices, et cetera. Any of that stuff important to you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. All right. Well, do you have any specific questions or anything you want to bring up before we get into the other stuff, or anyone else for that matter?
I don't personally. I just wanted to see what was happening in this particular session. And
okay.
Well, welcome, Andy. Where are you located?
Yeah.
I'm in the Boston area.
Okay.
And if you want, you can, I don't know if you've ever played with Zoom much, but you can go in and on your participants, you can add more information besides just your name if you like. Some of us have already put in there that we're liaisons. Right now, what you see in front of you is primarily liaisons, but we're open to any and all questions from the rest of the group. And don't let any of us intimidate you because we don't know what we're doing anyway. Part of our oath is to all say at the same time, I don't know, right?
That's right.
So, all right. So thank you, Mr. Andy. Any other questions before I jump in? Mark, Kelly, anything else? Question?
Where are you at, Mark? Mark, where are you located at?
I'm in Clarkston, Michigan.
Okay, good.
Hey, Mark.
There you are, Chris.
You know where that is, Chris? I don't know Clarkston.
North side
north
of
of Detroit.
Detroit suburbs.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Mark, I'm doing a Sunday night study group.
Ah, okay.
So put something in the
Chris.
chat there for him, Chris.
I will put the Zoom information in the chat.
Yeah.
Very good.
That's a great idea, Chris.
Cool. All right. Well, unless there's anything else, I'm going to steal the screen from you a little bit. Anybody else before I do that? Anybody? Going once.
Go ahead. I may have questions as I think about it, and
okay,
let's see where we go.
All right, let's see if I can find what I was looking for there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so what you should be seeing in front of you, and you even alluded to this. Whoops, that's the wrong one. I want that one. You alluded to this a while ago, Andy, was the practice test. There's CPC sample test. Now, I'm going to assume this is a test you were talking about, Andy. You can just nod or take yourself off mute, whichever's easiest for you.
Yeah, that's one of them. I did well on it.
Okay.
So it's really
all
just
right. Well, what's usual and customary on one of these calls is to bring out a question. And today I'm going to take it a little bit step further. Other than the questions, we're going to take a closer look at where do I get the answers and why was that the answer? I'm guessing that one of our usual attendees will be here a little bit later on and is going to tell you that she's a why person. She's always wanting to find out why. Whether she knows the answer to the question or not, she still wants to go on and find out the why, which is probably a good thing. But for today's question, I was going to borrow number 47 and number 50. And there's a reason behind those two. But number 47, if you take a closer look, and if you want, let me see if I can zoom in on that so you guys can actually read it. Hopefully that helps a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and read the question real quickly. Then I'm going to look for some interaction from you guys and what you would guess the answer might happen to be. Let me scroll down so you can see 47 a little bit better here. On 47, when reviewing a histogram, how can you tell that the shadows/highlights are clipped? Who wants to take a shot? Is it A, B, C, or D? Knowing that two of these answers are probably not even close, that narrows it down to A, B, C, and D, just two of those. But which one's the right answer? Who's going to raise their hand on that one? Okay, Mark, what do you got?
I think D.
You think D, a sharp drop on either end of the histogram tells you if the shadows or highlights are clipped.
Right.
All right, we got a bunch of folks on the call. Liaisons, try not to answer that question. Andy, you want to take a stab at it?
I would say C, because that's where you've got your highlights are all the way to the right. There's no information in there, or they're all the way to the left. There's zero brightness.
Okay. So we got a difference of opinion. We got a C, we got a D. Suzette, you want to chime in and pick something else? Or you want to say all of the above?
I was thinking C too.
Oh, C too. So I have to add something here and put a C and as well as a C. No, you meant C as well. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. So Suzette, since you said it last, why would you say a spike on either end of the histogram indicates that the shadows or highlights are clipped? Have you seen that somewhere? Have you seen it in any of the instructions or?
I think I don't understand any of the answers. I would think that it would be
That's
going
tough.
off the histogram.
Say it again. I'm sorry, somebody stepped
I
on
would
your
think the
words.
histogram, the shadows of the highlights would be like extending beyond or clipped up to the edge of it.
Okay. Mark,
Because
did you have something else you want? I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I think I had a clarification. I might have misunderstood the answer, and I don't know how to explain it. So if the shadow or highlight went to a spike, so I'm changing my
Okay.
to a spike.
Okay. So now we have 3 C's. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay. And Renee, now that you're off the phone, hopefully the pizza will be here in 30 minutes or less, but would you agree with C?
Yes.
And is that the way you answered it when you took this test, or do you have to go back and revisit and make sure that you had all your answers the way you wanted?
No, I was good on C.
Okay. And I bring that up because Renee will tell you that when you take the test, especially the online version, you may want to consider, once you've gone through all the questions, and by the way, this only shows 50, the actual test is 100. But Renee, I'm going to guess when you got to the end, you probably went back and revisited and make sure, did I get this one? Did I get this? Okay.
Yep.
And any other tips or tricks for the newbies with us this morning? To anything else that you would add?
Just typical test taking stuff is I went through and answered all of them, the ones that I thought, and then the ones that I wasn't sure of, I just marked and went back through, because sometimes if you answer one, it'll ask the same question in a different way later on in the test.
Good. Yeah.
Guide you to the right answer on the first question.
Yeah, there's well over 100 questions, and it grabs a random pool each time. And so, yeah, that could spin one way or another. You might have 2 questions that seem very, very similar, and then 2 that are totally distant from each other. But anything else, tips and tricks that you would give them, Renee?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Deb, anything else you'd want to add on that? Rebecca, or I can't quite tell who. Oh, Rebecca, Connecticut. I guess that's what that says.
After I read it well, I think I was looking at a sharp drop. I did put D in the chat, but it is, I believe it's C because it's a spike.
Okay. All right. You would be correct.
I think that would be the difference.
I think that's a good example of some of the questions is, in your head what the answer is, and if you read too fast, you'll get the wrong answer. So you kind of got to be careful about that when you do the test.
Right.
Right. And again, being a sample test, these questions may not appear on the real exam, so you don't have to get this verbatim. But I think what I mentioned a while ago may be important to you. As you take the exam, whether the written version and limited availability it has, or the online version, if you don't mind doing that one, every question has some answers that are throwaways. That's not the right answer, right? So think about it. When you see 4, which one doesn't match? Throw that one away. There's probably a second one that's probably pretty close to that. Throw it away. And then start concentrating on the 2. And to what you just mentioned, maybe I need to slow down a little bit and think that question through. Because how long are you going to get for the test, Renee? Do you remember?
I want to say it's like 2 hours.
Yeah, 2 hours for only 100 questions. So take advantage of the study time, or the time that they're allotting, the test time, and revisit when necessary. Now, somebody mentioned last week, I guess it was, about sometimes they don't want to go back and look at them because they have a tendency to change their answers. But with confidence, go back through, look at them one more time. Even on the online version, you can go backwards and take another look at them. They do them in sections, a little bit different than what the written might be. So I was asking as well, Andy, about where would you see an example of this? Where would you see an example of shadows or highlights that are clipped on a history?
I see it all the time. Anytime you're doing stuff with bright sun and shade, or if you're doing architectural photography, you'll get extremes.
Like if I was taking a picture of you right now, would I see possible clipping and possible blowouts if I were to photograph you right now the way you look on Zoom?
Well, my hairstyle doesn't help the clipping of the highlights.
It's not where I was going, but thank you.
Yeah, I looked at you before I answered that question, I figured that was fair game. And then this sweatshirt is certainly not going to give you much detail because it's very dark. So there's not much differentiation. Probably looks black. It's actually not black.
Okay. Yeah, and then maybe off to either side of it. Looks like you got French doors as well, like I do. And looks like there might be a little bit of clipping coming off that to your right side, my left. Might be clipping a little bit. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So that's what causes them. Where do you see the histograms, guys? Where are you going to see a good example of this? You know, we're talking about applying things that you would know. Where would I see something like this? An example of a clipped histogram. And we all know how painful that can be when you get your histogram clipped.
Where would
I
I
see that? Yeah.
I'm not sure quite what you're asking, but you'd see those, you'd see spikes at the left and the right side.
Okay. So Mark, what software do you use?
Lightroom mostly, and then Photoshop.
Okay. So have you ever seen a histogram?
See them all the time. I was going to say on the back of my camera. It's nice to be able to know if I've got a good exposure by interpreting the histogram. Like on a sunny day when I can't see the back of the camera so well, I can look at the histogram and apply.
Yeah, and the histogram on the back of your camera is kind of a crude version, right?
Yep.
But it does show you those extremes, those peaks, those clips, right? On that, when you said the histogram on your camera, if we looked at it inside Lightroom, have you ever noticed there's one in both the library module and the develop module? Do they do the same thing?
I don't know.
No. I'm not going to give this away because it's not terribly relevant to what we're talking about. But if you're in Lightroom itself, and by the way, you'll see the same thing inside Bridge, because Camera Raw and Bridge are what makes up the library and the develop modules. Okay. So you will be seeing the same histogram there. But if you're in the library module, that histogram doesn't have the same functionality as the develop module histogram does. Okay. And one way to correct those clippings, if you're in the develop module, you know, you'll see that blacks and then shadows, midtones, highlights, and whites, right? I think I got those in the right order. Mark, do you know how to correct those with just a quick double click?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah, double click and it'll bring them within range.
Well, you have to hold down the shift key. And if I were to hold down the shift and double click on the blacks, it would bring those back into range. Okay. Now I'm not talking about where you hit auto, because auto does all of them all at once. But if you want to just correct your blacks, you would hold down shift, double click the word blacks, and boom, it'll move it for you. Okay. You can do the same thing with your whites. You can actually do it with all of them, but relevant to this question, just a quick double click and Lightroom will tell you what it thinks is a non-clipped image. Okay. Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the best result. Sometimes it gets confused. Like, you know, Andy mentioned his shirt isn't really black. So you can fool Lightroom, but it's a good starting point. It's a great shortcut that just hold down shift or whatever that is. And isn't that the same in a Mac? I don't know. But you hold down shift, double click, and boom, it's fixed it.
Yep, it's the same.
Yep.
Where do you click at?
On the word black. So if you're looking at a clipped image,
Yeah.
okay, and let's assume the blacks are clipped, you would hold down your shift key, double click on the word black, and watch the slider move ever so slightly. Okay. Now, if it's not clipped, it won't work. It's only if it is clipped. The same thing if you move the whites too far, you can hold down shift, double click the word whites, it'll move it over. Okay. Did I answer what you asked, Renee?
I have a quick question.
Cool. I didn't know that.
Absolutely free. Come see me at Texas School. You'll get a whole week of that kind of stuff. What do you got, Andy? That was you, right?
Well, related to that, I guess when you hit auto, it doesn't give you the same white and black.
No.
And I'm kind of curious if you can comment on what the difference is.
Why the auto does what it does?
Well, not so much that. I was thinking specifically about trying to pull stuff back from the extremes.
Yeah. Well, you can go up in the histogram itself too, Renee. You know, I was saying click on the word black or click on the word white. You can also jump into the histogram and just drag the blacks up there or drag the whites up in the histogram itself. Okay. But you're not letting Adobe make that decision for you. So what Andy said, if you hit auto, all of those settings, blacks, shadows, midtones, highlights, and whites are all going to be changed at once. But think of that kind of like when you tell your camera to shoot in auto rather than manual, right? Buyer beware, your results may vary, right? Okay. I very rarely use the auto unless I've totally screwed up a shoot. Okay, because at least it's a starting point. And the catch with auto is you go from one image to the next, like shooting you, Andy, versus Renee with your different coloring of the backgrounds and the different colors of shirts, etc. The answers are going to be different anyway, just like it would be on a camera if you left it on auto, right? Did I answer even close to what you asked?
No.
Okay.
Well,
So
close, yes, but I was actually asking specifically about, so if I've got an image that's clipped in the highlights,
okay,
the solution that auto generates specifically on the highlight slider is different than the double-click solution would be.
Yes, it is.
And I guess, it's sort of in there, as you said, it's sort of generally trying to solve for what it sees as the color or the brightness values in the image, as opposed to specifically trying to solve for how do I get the right level for the highlights.
Yeah, it's taking 5 things and saying, well, what would I think those should be combined, right? Yeah. Rather than one thing and saying, okay, that's the only solution. And that's, again, kind of like manual. In manual, you can fix a thing, right? Whereas in auto, it's looking at the entire image and the entire exposure. And that's not exactly the same. I'm just using that for a analogy. Would that be, or parallel, whatever it is?
Close enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's just, my point is that I rarely use auto because of that. It rarely does what I want it to do. It may be giving me a correct exposure, but I probably wasn't looking for a correct. I was probably looking for something a little bit more creative in most cases. Okay. Good question, though, sir.
So real quick, Guy T, I just wanted to mention, I am keeping an eye on the chat. If you have a question, you can put that in the chat. And I also just put in the chat that the histogram is found on page 80 of the photography book by London and Upton.
And then you could wait for me to show them that.
Sorry, I jumped ahead.
Yeah, that's coming up. So to what Chris just said, let's jump into question number 49. And then, Chris, by the way, I will be coming back. You'll notice I got a bunch of stuff up in here in the top. I don't know if you guys can see that very well, but I will be coming back to some more steps. So thank you, Chris. You didn't know that because I didn't let you know. Let me see if I can scroll down and we'll look at question 49. We've been alluding to this, so you guys should know the answer by the time we got finished with that last discussion, right? Question 49. The area of an image that is the brightest is called, what do you think? Those of you who are still in the midst of the written exam.
Highlights.
You're saying the image of the brightest is called the highlights?
Yep.
I was thinking it was the teacher's pet. I was thinking the brightest one is the teacher's pet, but that's not on there. Okay, we got Suzette with highlights.
Agreed.
2. Anybody else? Any more votes?
I put A in the chat, highlights.
All right, yeah, highlights it is. And again, I don't know if this is one of those things you need to write down on an exam because you see it all day long, especially if you're using Lightroom or Camera Raw. Lots of different apps do it. Shadows, blacks. I should write it down. Blacks, shadows, midtones, highlights, whites, right? Okay, I think I got those in the right way there. But in this case, this is a good example of which ones would you write up, or as soon as you saw it, why would you get rid of a couple of those answers? Which ones did you eliminate right off the bat?
Shadows.
Grays for one. It's not
last
grays.
one? Yeah, shadows and grays don't even make sense, do they?
No.
How would that be the brightest part? Okay. And like I said, you're going to see that pattern over and over and over again. That's the way most standardized multiple choice questions are. They give you a throwaway or 2, and in most cases 2. I used to write this kind of stuff for a living. Yeah, I know. I'm glad I'm now doing what I do now. But when we'd write these things, we had to have a throwaway and then possibly a second throwaway anytime we created a multiple choice test. So it almost comes down to a yes, no, because it's either going to be one answer or another rather than truly a multiple choice, right? Okay. So we all concur that that is indeed the answer?
Yeah. I do have one comment to make about the question. So we just looked at the highlights of the data in the histogram, and you might be thinking that's what this question is referring to, but the question says the area of an image. So it's actually, even though we can see those highlights in the histogram, it's not talking about the histogram, it's talking about the image. So these would be the highlights like the French doors that, or the sweater, the black sweater. So just make sure you read the question properly, because that might change the answer. In this case, it doesn't, but it certainly could.
Yeah, and they're not really giving you all of the different things, right? They didn't say anything about blacks. They didn't say anything about whites. But based on what they are giving you, there's got to be an answer somewhere, right? Is that kind of where you're going, John? Well, you're on mute again, sir.
I was referring specifically that it said the area of an image.
Mm-hmm.
And because we just were thinking about histograms, we might be thinking what part of the histogram is the brightest and what is it called? But actually this related to the pixels in the image, the features that are blown out. And so I'm just using that as an example to make sure that you look at the question carefully to make sure your answer is from the question, not from what you're thinking the question might be.
Yep. One was about a histogram, one is about an image. And while they are similar questions, they are definitely not asking the same thing twice. Thank you, John. All right. So let's see, by the answer, I'm going to go ahead and switch gears here a little bit and jump over to the answer key for all of these. And this kind of alludes to what Chris was talking about. Andy, I'm not sure. Have you seen that there is a sample test with answers?
Yep.
Okay. And what you will see, thank you, Andy. What you will see on the 50 questions, it tells you on every single question, where'd they get that question from? It's not where they got the answer from. It's where they got the question itself from, because they use a number of sources. I believe, what we agree, there was 8 different suggested reading books, for example. Okay. And so some of those books are more prevalent than others. And in this particular case, on this 50 question sample test, what one book is the most prevalently cited as being used to create the questions? What one book of the 8 that are cited is by far the most prevalent?
London and Upton.
The London.
Is that Suzette? Yeah.
London and Upton, which I'll be buying right after this is over.
Okay. London and Upton, in this particular case, while you guys were talking a couple of weeks ago, I went through and figured this out. It's in there 76% of the time. Okay, so 38 out of these 50 questions refer to London and Upton. It then drops off to a little book, a big book, I should say, called Digital Photography, big fat book. I got that one here. This is the second most referred to book, very dry reading. And then there's a few more. One of them is Monty Zucker's posing book. And then it drops off to only one question each in this sample test. So assuming that the sample test represents the greater test, and I know it does, but I would strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that you take advantage of that photography book. That being said, Deb, what's a good London and Upton book go for? Don't answer that question, Chris.
$25.
Yeah, where'd you find that, Deb?
My liaison.
Yeah, are we talking about Santa Claus?
Chris Jones.
Oh, that, okay. Well, Santa Claus found that one for us and gave it to us well after Christmas. Chuck, are you going to put that link in the? I
just put it in there, Guy T. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. That's fine. Okay. Let me see if I can get some stuff out of the way here so I can get to something else here. All right. So if we were going to use something like that and we only wanted to pay about $25, not the usual price point, because if you get this book in its printed version, it's going to be, I believe most of the quotes were $100 and up or something like that.
Yep.
Even rental versions were still more than $25. Now, John Gaylor has some concerns about this book, but I haven't found the flaw yet. And I do not know if there's any flaws with getting it from that particular source, but for $25, it gives you all 400 plus pages. You can print all 400 plus pages. Buyer beware, by the way. Please do it all in one print job, because now I've got a mess sitting on my desk that I still have to get organized. But that's the most current version. You may have noticed before that you can get either the 11th or 12th version, but the version that we're looking at right now is indeed the 12th edition. The only thing I've noticed that they keep changing is the cover changes a little bit, but like I believe it was you and I, John, we were going through looking for specific things, and the answers were still the same. They just weren't necessarily on the exact same page anymore. So if I looked on page 80 of one book, it might be on page 83 on another, page 75 on another, for example. So if you see a steal of a deal on a printed version, the odds are pretty high that it probably be the same thing. But at $25 for a searchable document, I'd say that's pretty good, right? And I just hit page 8. Let's see how long it takes before it scrolls for me.
Just
right, so there.
Just a
Yeah.
real quick commentary or plug. I have
Are you going to
both.
talk about the book again?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I have both the printed version. I bought the loose leaf version so I could take notes, and then these guys guilted me into getting the PDF version. And I really do like the PDF version because it is searchable. So go ahead. Sorry about
Yep.
that.
That's a
Excuse
great
me.
point. Thank you.
Excuse me, Suzette, you sent that only to me? Suzette's having trouble with that link, but
Okay.
you chatted only to me.
Yeah, I just sent it to everyone. I'm figuring out the chat thing.
Okay.
Oh.
The link doesn't work, or it takes you
Okay.
to a page that says it's under construction.
Well, Chuck is
No,
probably
it does
furiously
work.
working on that as we speak. Well, somebody said it does work.
It does work.
Yeah, I
It works
just got to
it
it
works for
too.
me.
I wonder though, because I've had people say that as well. If you have gone to that page before, if it works, and if not, if it's still in your if it's in your history,
Oh,
it still works.
Hmm.
Because I've had somebody tell me that same thing before.
yeah. Okay.
But it does
Well,
work for most people.
By the way, I don't know if you noticed, but I am not on page 80 according to Acrobat Reader. That's part of what makes printing this a little bit chaotic, but also they give you a bunch of preface stuff that's not necessarily relevant. But I am now on page 80 printed version, right? So page 80 down there. If you were to look at that page, where did you see the answer to the questions we just asked? 47 or 50? You see them on there anywhere, guys? Because they're not going to give you the question verbatim right out of here. It's not like a copy and paste. What do you think? Where's an answer in there?
Are you talking about pictures or writing?
Well, I'm looking at page 80. If, one of the frustrations that a lot of folks like you guys talk about is, I've got these reference books, but I still don't know where the answer is. So those questions were about highlights and shadows and clipping and brightest part of an image. If I bought this book, even at 25 bucks, thank goodness I didn't buy it for 100, right? If I bought it for 25 bucks and flipped to that page, why would I go, well, why in the world did they cite page 80?
It's right there in the middle.
Right there in the middle. You're talking about this one?
Nope, down below.
Right there? Yeah. So while it's not saying that those are specifically clipped, right? And I don't know if anybody's got their version open and wants to type in the word clipped and see where that search takes you. But yeah, it is showing you a high contrast version that is indicating clipping. If you see that in your histogram, right, whether it's on the back of your camera, in Adobe Camera Raw, Lightroom, Photoshop, whatever it is in, that is not a good thing. This also should not appear in your image submission. You may have some things slightly clipped, but it should not be that extreme. If you get that much pushed into either edge, that's indicating a problem. You may have a little bit of a strain, just right there at the edge, just one thin line or whatever. But if you've got that much mass at the bottom and you got that much on the left-hand side, that's not an image that's going to get passed. Any comments on that, Chuck?
Can you zoom into the highlight clipping that you were pointing to on that histogram with the two peaks, one at either end?
Okay, get closer to your mic because I think I heard what you said, but I'm not sure.
Can you zoom in to the
Oh.
highlight clipping on that histogram with the two peaks?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not clipped. So
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Clipping is where, as we were talking earlier, where the brightnesses would go way past that at that point. And what happens is that all the gray levels that will be above 255 get put in the bin for 255. And that's why they make a line. So the histogram that you were showing there is not clipped at the bright end. That's actually okay. All of the detail in the image will still be there. But at the dark end, certainly there's a big peak that goes into the zero bin of the histogram. And that is what clipping is. But the bright area is not clipped.
Okay.
So that's an example on the ball. If you were looking at the ball and you had that kind of a peak, that likely would not fail. But if you were looking at the crayon and you're looking at the blacks and you've got a black peak like that, that would likely fail.
Okay. And as you notice, guys, John takes this stuff quite literally. He's a very tech savvy kind of guy. My point, John, was simply saying that you don't want it to be, low contrast is one thing, and these peaks that you see on that low contrast example, right? As opposed to these high peaks at the edges. So thank you for the clarification, John. Okay.
Also, I did search for the word clipping, and it takes you to this very page.
Okay. So it's in there somewhere, huh?
Yeah, it's over on the right-hand side, right under where it says overexposure.
Oh, yeah. Right there, clipping. Okay. A sharp cutoff of tones, visible at right just as it is at the left, yada, yada, yada. Okay. And there's, let me zoom in on that one. Let's see what we got there. So you see in this case, that streak that's going all the way to the top, right? Yeah, you got a lot of body of it here that, to what John was saying, if it was stopping about where my cursor is right now, wouldn't be a problem. But when it goes all the way up to the top at the edge, is that fair, John? Oh, you're on mute again.
Can't read his lips.
Try it again, John. There you go.
My lips.
You can see the difference between the yellow histogram where the rightmost bin, the very last bin of the histogram, has data in it going right up to the top and beyond probably. That's different. That is clipping. And on the one that's the black one you were just pointing to then.
Yeah, you see it's got a dead space right there.
It comes down before the end. That's not clipping. That's just, that's highlights with detail.
Yep. Okay. And those of you with cameras that can do it all.
High contrast image, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, don't go after that peak right there. If you go to where my cursor is, how's that, John?
Exactly.
Okay. That's the extreme I was talking about, but you're already getting into the wrong tendencies. And to what we talked about before, you want to correct it, just click on the buttons in Lightroom, or in Lightroom's histogram, you see how these are divided into several sections? You'll see these are divided into 5 sections inside Lightroom, and each of those 5 represents black, shadows, etc. And so all you do is just grab it and drag, whatever way is necessary. Same thing if you were messing with, this only has 4 sections. I guess that's the way Nikon does it. But in Lightroom, you'll see 5 sections. You can click and drag your midtones. You can click and drag your shadows, etc. Okay, whatever section you want, and they're going to move just like the sliders would below. So if you're a visual person, move it up in the histogram. If you're a linear person, go down and grab one of the sliders. Okay. Now there was something that just popped into my head. Let me see if I can get it to come back.
I know what it was. It was, how do you prevent capturing an image like this in the first place? Because your raw image for your technical image submission, you won't be able to move the histogram using the Lightroom controls. So how would you
and that's exactly where I was going. Yep,
how would you avoid this in the first place, though?
Yeah, so to what John said, and to reiterate it about 27 times, you have to submit raw images. And raw could be CR2s, NEFs, an Olympus ORF, could be a DNG, okay, whatever your camera shoots and is considered truly raw. But you cannot touch that image after it's been captured. You can't mess with any of the exposures. You can't add a vignette because you think it'd look cool. You don't want to mess with any of that stuff. So to what John just said, you're going through the image submission or even everyday life. How do you avoid those peaks? Thank you for reminding me, John. Again, this is the interactive portion, and there's Rebecca. What do you think? How do you avoid those?
Light meter.
Say it again.
A light meter.
Okay. And what kind of? I'm guessing you're talking about a kind of light meter are you using?
I have a Sekonic.
Okay, you got the old 358 silver, or you got a 478 black?
358 silver.
Okay, is your 358 and my 478 going to come up with different answers? Because mine cost a whole lot more.
Shouldn't.
Okay, and thank you for saying that. I was hoping you wouldn't disagree. The only reason I got rid of my old silver Sekonic was because I couldn't read it in broad daylight. It's got the old-fashioned LCD, but the answers are exactly the same. I just had problems seeing it. Okay, nice thing about that 478. Great big digital display, plus it's touch and things like that. Maybe I'm crazy for trading that in for another one, but I just like being able to see things. Maybe I'm crazy. If I bought one of the super cheap Sekonics, would it still work the same? What do you think, guys? Because this is an investment you keep making. You got to pay for this and pay for that. You think so, Suzette?
It should.
Okay, is that the kind you have? Yeah. What kind did you guys get?
I don't know the model of mine. It's got more bells and whistles than I know what to do.
Yeah, you could get a 758, for example, or some of their $1,500 things that also do color. Or just a question. You could buy, have any of you guys ever seen a Illuminati light meter? Kind of an intimidating name, but there's a light meter called an Illuminati. It's a triangular shape. Anybody seen one of those? Mm-hmm. Might be something you may want to look at just in case, if you haven't already decided on one. It's both available for use with an iPhone or an Android. If you've got Android, take a look at it, have your receipt just in case you need to return it. But on iPhone, it works very, very well. And why I'm bringing that one up is because Sekonic makes, industry standard light meters, right? But they also can be very proud of those light meters, and you rarely will see a discount, right? But an Illuminati is only about $300 in the first place, okay? And what really sets the Illuminati apart is that the Illuminati not only measures light, but it also measures color. And if you're trying to get a color meter in a Sekonic, you might as well sell one of your kidneys, okay? Because they're extremely proud of those. So, if nothing else, take a look at that. Chuck or Chris, if you want to do a web search for Illuminati meter, not Illuminati books, not Illuminati culture, but the Illuminati meter. And again, it's available for use with either iPhone or anything iOS or Android. I don't know about any other versions, but what you do is it's this little bitty triangle. It would fit in the palm of your hand, okay? And you sync it to your phone, and you control everything from the phone. But it's a very clever design, came out about 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't know how many of you guys know Tony Corbell, one of the most gifted and most acclaimed photographers in the country. But Tony Corbell also endorsed that product when it first came out. So just a thought, if you wanted something different. I've got one. I just can't get it to be stable enough using an Android. But who knows? Next software update, it may be. Okay. But if you got an iPhone, I've heard nothing but raves.
The difference between that and like a light meter that we're familiar with?
Well, I'm sorry I didn't bring it to the call with me, but if you guys want, I can run away and go get it. But physically, it's a much smaller device, okay? And again, it doesn't have any indicators on it other than it's got a dome just like your Sekonic would that can pop in, pop out. Otherwise, a triangular shape, and it's, I don't know, the thickness of a cell phone maybe. But imagine something about that big, very, very small, right? Everything else is being taken care of on your iPhone or iPad, so you can get the display to be as big as you want, right? Okay. And like I said, you can control everything from there. So you're going to be setting your ISO, you're going to be setting your aperture, et cetera, all off of that other device, which is pretty cool. Okay. Yeah. And because of that design, you can also, depending on which Sekonic you have, it may be able to trigger your lights, right? Not all models do. Okay. But with that Illuminati, you can put it like what Corbell first showed when he first put it out there. Let's say my subject was me, right? Or somebody was taking a picture of me. I would put the Illuminati right next to me on a stand because it also has threads for a stand. So you can put it on there right next to me, right? And take measurements while I'm changing my lighting, right? That's kind of cool. While you're actually shooting, you can keep reading, right? But I also could go ahead and trigger my lights and see that answer. My phone's going to be right next to me at camera. The meter's over here, right? So it gives you flexibility you can't get from a conventional meter. Did I answer what you asked?
Yep, thank you.
And again, iPhones, I'd recommend it. Never heard a negative thing about iPhone users in Illuminati. For Android, it's a mix. Okay. All right.
There's a question in the chat.
Okay. Thank
how
you.
would a light meter help or not help in this case?
Help what?
You were talking about when you started the conversation, whether or not how to fix the problem of you have a
clipping.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to go to.
All right. Who asked that question?
It was a liaison, so I'm gonna. But I think it's a pretty important question.
Yes, it is. Okay. So if I'm using a light meter, and Deb, feel free to jump in. Rebecca, feel free to jump in. And I don't know Jennifer Rivera, do I? I don't know if I know that name yet. But Jennifer, you can jump in as well. Why would I even use a meter? Because there are lots of photographers out there that don't use them. Some of them swear against them. So why would you use a meter? Why is Tony Corbell, most accredited photographer in the US probably, I don't know, very, very gifted photographer, just stunning work. He uses a meter. Why?
Proper exposure.
Okay. So if, let's say I didn't use a meter and I set up my lights and fired away, am I going to get a perfect exposure because my camera has all those auto functions?
Not always, not necessarily.
Okay. Does it matter what I'm pointing
at? You may
at?
get close.
I'm going to borrow you again, kind of like I borrowed, I think it was Andy a while ago. You got on a dark shirt, you got light skin. Could that make my camera give me a wrong answer?
Yeah, it's possible.
That didn't sound confident.
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay, Rebecca, you've come off mute. What do you think? I'm trying to take a picture of Deb, and I'm just going to use auto on my camera, and I'm talking about either auto exposure or whatever. I'm using all my camera's intelligence because they're amazingly smart these days. Could I still mess up an exposure?
If you on auto, you said?
Yeah, if I used all the auto functionality of my camera, could I still mess up an exposure using Deb?
I think more likely than not.
Okay. One thing is there's extremes, right? Okay. But what is a camera meter doing? How is it measuring a proper exposure? Is it incident or is it reflective?
Reflective.
Okay. So Suzette showing off there. Tell us more about incident versus reflective.
Reflective is measuring the light that is reflecting off of the subject. Incident is the light measured falling on the subject.
Okay, so which one's going to be more accurate if I'm using lights?
Incident.
Okay, so on that Sekonic meter, you'll notice it's got multiple settings. So you can tell it whether these are constant lights, such as daylight, or truly constant lights like that one that's lighting me up right now, or flash. Have you noticed there's two different sets of settings?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the one that looks kind of like a lightning bolt does which?
It's flash.
Yeah, that's flash. So when you guys are using your meter to do your exam, or for that matter, just taking a picture of Deb, I want to put that meter where? In relation to Deb, where am I going to put the meter?
Yeah.
Okay, something like Deb did. And by the way, that's a 478 that Deb has in her hands. Thank you very much. I don't know which variation because there's like 4 or 5 versions. Okay. And Deb, where is the light that's being used? Is it right in front of you?
Yes, the light is right in front of me.
Okay. So if the light was way over here, a lot of times you see online, they talk about putting your light 45 degrees high and 45 degrees to the left or right. Where would I point that meter then?
Towards the light.
Yeah.
And Deb, that was incredible. You sounded exactly like Suzette on that one, and you even moved her lips. That was so cool. So things to do when you're doing your image submission, you'll see, oh, look, I forgot his name all of a sudden.
Jamie Hayes.
Thank you. I was going to say Jeremy, and I knew that wasn't right. So Jamie Hayes, you're going to see him do a demo, and is he going to point that meter just randomly?
No.
What's he do, Deb?
Gonna point it towards the light.
But he's got 2 of them. So now what's he do? He's got one off to the left. He's got one right behind the camera, right? That's what the image submission tells you. The technical image evaluation says put one 90 degrees right or left, excuse me, and another one right there at the camera, pretty much. I'm not using the words verbatim. Rebecca, you want to add your 2 cents worth?
Yes, sir. I'm struggling with this a lot because I'm doing this right now.
Okay.
He blocks the light with his body. The other light with his body. When I'm doing mine, I'm turning mine off because I don't want the ambient light coming in.
Yeah, and I would agree with what you're doing, Rebecca. When I saw him doing that, I'm kind of small, right? But I'm as big as I'm ever going to get. So I can't necessarily do exactly what he says and feel confident about it. Guys, feel free to get that meter exactly right, one light at a time, right? Mm-hmm. Measure it, turn it off, turn the other one on, measure it, etc. Right? Is that kind of what you're describing, Rebecca?
Yes, sir. And I have questions on this point, so I don't want to interrupt you, but when you're done, I'd like to ask a question.
No, you did a great job of interrupting. Go ahead and go for it.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, perfect.
I set my light exactly as I was told to set my light. I have done everything according, and every time I'm setting my light the way it's supposed to be at the exact distances that they prescribe, I'm getting blown out images or 2 blown out images. And I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And so go ahead, Chris, sorry.
No, I just had an idea about, first, I will say, I don't want to discredit what Guy T has said because there is something on your meter that can help you. What meter do you have?
I have a piece of crap 308 L.
Yeah, that's the black one, right?
The
And
little.
it's actually gray.
Okay. Yeah. Have you tested it against another meter?
No, never.
Okay. There
That
may
would probably change my life. I can do that.
So there is the one thing you want to look at is the little dome on the top of your meter. It slides back and forth.
Yep.
Make sure that is in the correct place. Make sure it's covering up the sensor.
Yep, that's where it's been.
Then you may want to find somebody with another meter and make sure that you're getting a good meter reading. Meters can, and this is where meters can be individualized. You can, and it's called calibration. And I highly recommend if you have the opportunity, you could to calibrate your meter before you even start, except for lower end meters. So I would check if you know somebody that has a light meter that you can check your light meter against. Maybe your meter. The only other thing that could be is maybe you're not putting the settings in your camera the same.
Yeah, you need to make absolutely sure whatever that meter says. Those are your settings.
I'm walking into week 2 on trying to get this stuff right. In the place I'm living in right now, and I'm so thankful you're talking about this today, is I realized that no one can see how my lights are set in my metadata, and I'm trying to just match the image, and I'm struggling to get that done. But I mean, my lights are way too bright for what it's supposed to look like. So I'm thinking they can't see how my lights are set in my metadata, correct? How many liaisons who are going to be looking at my image are on this call right now? Oh no.
Yeah. Yeah. You won't see light settings, but you're using them at the prescribed height, right? Minimum height 30 inches.
Yep.
30 to 34 inch umbrella. Right. Actually, I think it says
3 feet
are the height, right?
I think mine are 36-inch umbrellas. So if that can change it that much, I'd be shocked. But I mean,
it'll change your shadows.
Okay.
But that's not what you described. But and you're not using shoot throughs. You're using bounce, just like Jamie uses, right? Where you're pointing the light away.
Yep, exactly.
And yet you say when you put that meter.
Even still, that would not, if you're putting the settings that you read in your light meter into the camera, you should not be getting blown out images.
I agree, but it said that you had to set. I tested my light, and I mean I'm the 5.6. I've only worked on one image so far. The 5.6, the shoot down and focus on the top of the head is. I'm putting in the 5.6, and I'm at my lowest ISO, and I am at my highest. I mean, I only have a 1/200th option, and I'm getting blown out images. So that's why I've just been so frustrated, and I can't figure out what I'm doing wrong.
So here's you're running into a little bit of the clues that you need to catch on the instructions on the image submission.
Help me, Sensei.
So you have to, as you set your lights up, as you set your exposures, you do have, especially if you've got mono lights, the only instruction that you're given as far as exposure is concerned in setting up is you need to use F11. So
it says I'm supposed to read. I thought.
So
I'm sorry.
That's what you're metering at is F11.
Right.
So you need to think about the whole project and your exposure equivalence. Here's a good term for others on the call. Your exposure equivalence, when you get to f5.6, you need to use an aperture, or I'm sorry, a ISO that will still work, and you need to kind of compare that to, well, I metered it at f11, that's 2 stops, 3 stops, 2 stops difference. I need to figure out what my ISO that I use when I do set up my lights are. So I set up, and I know I'm not making this very clear because I can't understand it myself. I understand what I'm saying, but I don't understand what's coming out of my mouth.
Well, let me
hard to do it when you can't tell the answers.
Yeah, Rebecca, we can follow up one-on-one if you want.
That'd be great. I'm taking up too much of your time, and I hate that. I'm sorry.
No.
Well, that's okay. You're asking great questions that probably somebody else has as well. But in any case,
we will
powering.
I'm just letting Rebecca know we'll go over any of those issues you have on Friday. I'm doing a
good
review with Rebecca on Friday.
Great.
To help her through all these things.
Yeah.
Ron has got sun in his eyes. He's trying to block the sun from his eyes, I think.
No, I just wanted to circle back to that one comment about standing in front of the light to block it when you're trying to measure one strobe versus both of them. And I do that freely. I'll admit it, just because it's easier for me. It's faster for me to do that. But the one watch out if you do that is if you like hold your hand, like seeming like you're blocking the one strobe light from hitting the dome. What you're actually doing is you're creating a reflector that is now going to take whatever the incident light that's coming in and bounce it off of that to add to. So if you're going to block it, you got to block it back far enough away from the light meter that you aren't actually adding a reflector into that measurement as well.
Yeah. And anybody on the call using a Westcott FJX2M or any other remote trigger, like a Canon STR-T3 or something, whatever they call it? Anybody using one of those? A third way you can do it, yeah, you can walk back and forth like Jamie and like Ron does. But on certain triggers that you would put on the, on your hot shoe on your camera before you press the shutter, right? You can also put to sleep your lights. I use Westcott stuff, lots of Westcott stuff, and one of them is their FJX2M. I think I got that right. I don't know who came up with that name, but that's not a good one. But that trigger gives you the ability to put to sleep any of the different lights. So if I've got 3 lights going and I'm trying to read, or I'll just stick with this example, Rebecca. If I've got a light on the left, that's the only one that's ready to go. I've put the other one to sleep. I would then use that trigger to put the left one to sleep, turn the one behind the camera on, right? So it lets you do them without having to turn anything on and off. You keep your readings exactly where they are, etc. So, but let us hear back from you and Chuck go over this. I'm guessing it's got to be something about the settings on the light itself. Chris may be right.
I'm just an idiot and I'm missing something, but I've read this 1,000 times.
I doubt that's it, but yeah, powering down your lights as much as you can, using the exact same readings to what Chris just said, making sure your ISO matches, your aperture matches, because that light meter will tell you everything. It's the keys to the kingdom, right? So.
We can stay on in overtime too, Rebecca. I can't stay very long because I've got a meeting with Deb, but yeah. Remember, Deb, we got a meeting today.
Okay. Oh, and by the way, Mia, are you still with us?
Yep.
Okay, Mia, we have said this is on page 80, page 81, right, of the Stone Guide. But Mia brought up a great point the other day about, wow, I don't want to pay $25, much less $100 for the printed version of this. Aren't there other resources people may already have or may be more inclined to use? So if we bounce over here, we've got Steve Kozak's CPP Study Certification Guide. And in this particular case, oh, I wrote this down the other day. What did I put the answer? Give me just about 2 seconds here, boys and girls, while I try to remember what page number that was on. Page 61. Let's see if his works the way I want it to. Give it a second here.
The searching in the guide?
Say again?
Can you demonstrate searching in the guide?
I just went up here and just typed in 61 because I'd already done it. But in that guide, it's just like any Acrobat thing. If I hit Control F and then type in whatever words. But in this particular case, this is Steve Kozak's study guide. It is optional. It's $99 or less. But along with Steve Kozak's study guide, I would strongly recommend Steve Kozak as a good mentor for the entire process, both the written and the image submission. Steve Kozak at stevekozak.com is where you could reach him. But this is his particular guide that is a total of 189 pages, and he uses his course content to walk you through the process. Here's his example, though, of histograms and where you might find an understanding of what we've been talking about here. You'll notice that he's got, right? He's got the bar over here on the left. He's got the bar over on the right. So that looks a lot like what we saw earlier. The descriptions are not the same because both Steve and Chris Duncan, which we'll look at and hear in a minute, are both the only certified or recognized, or authorized, that's the word, authorized CPP instructors when it's imaging and things like that. And they both have content That is an interpretation in many cases of the test itself. They do not have access to the actual test, but they write content that is as close to that content as possible based on their many, many years. Kozak just passed 40 years in business, for example, and he uses that as course content, knowing that that's the kind of content that will be applicable to the actual exam, and for that matter, to the image submission and to your real life application of these things. Steve is big on real life application. This just happens to be his version of histograms. Okay. So strongly recommend those. They're not free, they're optional, but I would guess, I don't know the specific answer, but I would be willing to bet that Steve's folks who go through his entire process are probably far more likely to pass, and more importantly, far more likely to impress their clients with what they've learned going through this CPP process. Any questions about that one before I bounce to another?
I used that study guide and I really liked it. I thought it was extremely helpful.
Okay. Did you already pay Steve, or Steve already pay you for that accolade?
No.
He's got me on a payment plan. It's just once a month, but it'll work.
I'm using his guide too. And
yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
What's even more valuable is his conversations that go along with it and his Facebook page and yada, yada, yada. So, and then let's look at one more. It's already a little after 2, but I don't have a problem with it. We're on the Chris and Deanna Duncan one. Let me see what page that one was supposed to be. That one is on page 84. So let's go see page 84.
Yeah, not a problem, guy. It's only a little after 1.
Okay. There's Chris's interpretation of same thing. If you're a visual person and you don't mind interact, or you like, I should say, if you prefer interactive videos, right? And what I mean by interactive, his course comes with an entire suite of things. It has this guide that's 250 pages, right? But this guide was designed for use during one of his live classes. If you're not able to attend a live class, like he did it, imaging a couple of years ago and other things like that, if you weren't able to attend live, you look at his videos. And as you go through the videos, he's going through these pages. That's the slide you would see in his video. That's the slide you would see in his video. Here's more or less what he said. It's kind of paraphrased a little bit. Every once in a while, this was actually using transcription software. Every once in a while, you'll see a word, you go, that's not what he said, because the transcription's a little bit off. But in any case, his guide is a different way of doing it. Very, very thorough at 250 pages plus videos. So you got that balance. You could use the suggested reading list. If you totaled all those books up, that's like $400 worth. Chuck was nice enough to find us that $24.99 version. Thank you again, Mr. Chuck. But then you have these options as well. So plenty of ways, depends on how you learn and how you want to learn this process. I am about out of content myself. Questions, concerns, need to throw darts? Jennifer, you keep bouncing in and out. Do you have any questions today? Or Lawrence? Anybody?
I have a question.
I'm good, sir.
Hey, sir, thank you. That's a nice touch.
How much did you pay her?
Yeah, she must not know me, huh?
So I am struggling with the terminology in stops. Like stop is, if you're at F11, you need to go down a stop and a half. To me, down a stop and a half would mean less light. Obviously, that's incorrect.
Okay, now that was the crickets that you just heard there, Renee. Anybody want to run with that one? I've already talked way too much.
You're asking for a liaison to answer that?
Oh, I was going to see if Jennifer or Deb, Lawrence.
Why is it, if it's less, why are you adding more light? Is it less because you're going less on the number side? Or is that just the way it is and I need to just accept it and move on? I mean, I'm okay with that too.
Repeat what you're asking again. It's like
Okay, so on our light exam, you're supposed to start off at F11. And at your main light, your other light is supposed to be 1.5 stops less.
Got it.
Well, to me, 1.5 stops less means less light. So you're going up to 16. That's incorrect. Right?
Where does 16 come from?
Well, I'm saying 1.5 stops less. So to me, that's 1.5 stops less light.
Well, 16 wouldn't be 1.5 stops, but
right.
And it wouldn't be less. That's 16 is more than 11.
And I think that's part of her question is Renee is saying if it goes to 11 to 16, that's more, right?
Yes.
But you'll hear people who will say 1.5 stops less, but they're meaning less light rather than less numeric, if that makes sense. That's kind of what you're saying, right, Renee?
Well, I'm saying if I'm at F11 and you say 1.5 stops less what?
So think of it this way, Renee. If my light is my main light is F11 and my fill light needs to be less intense, my meter should need, or my lens should need to be open more to get a proper 18% gray.
Okay, I think you're confusing the issue. She's going with just setting the lights and you're throwing some aperture in there, and I think that's going to make it worse. Yeah, when they're saying less, yeah, that's less light. A number lower than F11 is going to be less light.
Okay.
If you go to a number higher than F11, you're adding more light into it.
Okay.
If you do, I mean, you can find f-stop charts all over the place, and you'll see F11 and F8 is one stop. That's F8 is one stop less than F11.
You gotta understand what she's saying, because the way I'm understanding, and I think I'm understanding it the same way, Rebecca, as you, because if you're looking at I'm looking at the chart, the aperture, shutter speed and ISO. So if you go to the left, which is from 11 down to 8 or 5, 6, isn't that doubling the light?
No.
It's
an aperture, yes.
Okay. I don't know if you guys can see what I just brought up on the screen here. Renee, I don't know if that's any help. That's from Chris's book, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
An aperture of F8 lets in more light than an aperture of F11.
Correct.
Yes.
So why are they saying 1.5 stops less if it's more light?
Because it's not talking about the actual aperture, it's talking about the amount of light.
And that's why I brought this up.
Okay.
Okay. If I were to take it down 2 stops, I'm going from half power to quarter, right? For example. And if I take it down 3 stops, I'm going down to 1/8 power. So I'm assuming, if your light was at 1-to-1 ratio, full power, 1 stop would be 1/2, 2 stops would be 1/4, right, Renee? Uh-oh, did we just blow a fuse, Renee?
No, I'm literally just talking f-stop numbers.
Well, I think what Chuck was alluding to there was it's no longer the f-stop that they're talking about. Yeah, the first step was to get F11, but then it said stop and a half less, and that's why I'm using this side of the chart instead.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, that's where it gets confusing, because when they're talking about stops, you can be talking about aperture stops or light power stops.
Yeah, any of the 3 can affect a stop, right? So if that other light needs to be a stop and a half less, then you would drop the power accordingly. So if it said drop at 1 stop and your light was on 1-to-1 ratio, it'd now be on 2. I know a lot of lights don't do that anymore. Now they just say 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, but you would drop at a full stop to make the other light versus this new one, 1 full stop less. Go another half stop and you're there.
If you're shooting outside on a bright sunny day, sunny 16 rule, right?
Yeah.
So you're shooting at F16, and all of a sudden the sun goes underneath the cloud. What are you going to do to your lens? Where's your lens going to be set now?
You mean my aperture?
Yes.
See, to me, I would say I need more light So I would go down in numbers.
Down.
Yeah, but remember, you're not changing the aperture. You're changing the light. That's what Chuck was alluding to. Right? For that image, you have to keep the aperture the same. So when it says 1.5 stops less, it's not referring to the aperture because you have a known value you can't change anymore. So you drop the light power 1.5 stops, right, Chuck?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Okay, I got it now.
Yeah, because you can't change the aperture. Otherwise, your image is definitely not going to be right because it was supposed to be f11, right? So if I got f11 on one light, it's not telling you set the other one at f8, f16. It's saying 1.5 stops less. Okay,
Yeah,
and that's why
where it is confusing when you're talking stops in aperture. It's the numbers go backwards.
No, that's what's confusing.
That's what that chart's showing.
The bigger the number, the smaller the aperture. But when you're talking about light power, the bigger the number, the more light.
Right. Okay. And Renee, do you have that? You want to take a screenshot of that?
I have it. I got to sit down and think about it a minute. I think I got it, but I'm not positive. So
call me when you get it, because I'm still wondering what I'm doing.
Again, to what Chuck alluded to.
Who said that?
Rebecca.
That was Rebecca.
Okay.
The question on the test is about using a specific aperture. Since we already know that's f11, do not change that. To what Chuck alluded to, only change that second light because we know what the value of the left-hand light is. Correct?
Right.
So when you say change that second light, what are you saying?
Okay, if we metered that left-hand light, right? Let me see. I was going to look at the exact
the main light, which is camera left at f11.
Right. That's one we no longer can change, right, Chuck?
Leave that one alone. Now you've got your fill light, which is behind camera.
Mm-hmm.
That one needs to be, the power from that light needs to be 1.5 stops lower than your main light.
Okay.
Okay, so forget about aperture on that second light. And that's where you got to do the math and say, okay, f11 minus 1.5 stops equals, and no, we're not going to give you that answer.
And that's where, your light meter, once you get it to, you adjust the light until your light meter is going to say your fill light is showing you 1.5 stops less power than the f11 from your main light.
So isn't this the ratios?
Yep.
Yeah, that does get you a ratio, and the two of them will, because of the way they're set up, they're actually going to add together on Sherman.
Well, that's where I'm struggling at with the ratio.
Well, if you knew anything about Greeks, they had Horatio. Well, in this case, it's just lighting ratio. It's his younger brother that didn't do well. He also had another brother named aspect ratio, very square.
Deb, if you like to cook, I had to put mine in terms of cooking in order to say, oh, this much and that
There you
much.
go.
And then finally it clicked in me because that was where I saw ratios was in measurements and measurements was in cooking.
Yep. And Mia, did I answer what you asked about what books, what references, what pages, at least for the content I have?
I think since I don't have all three of those handy, I only have the one.
Okay.
I appreciate, because I'm sure others are looking and going,
Well, this is as close to I can get to a hug to you, Mia. This is my gift back to you.
Well, guy, you're so sweet. See that guy?
Yeah,
No,
Mia
I
brought
think
up a
it's
point
really
the other day about
beneficial.
citing multiple resources, but then also getting specific whenever we could, because there's so many resources out there. Not everybody has the same one. So we don't want to refer to just Chris or just this. The freebies, of course, are the best resource, but Chris and Steve both have great content for you guys to take advantage of if that's within the budget.
Well, if
What
you
you got,
like
Chris?
me, it took
I was
3
saying
different
goodbye to
ways.
Suzette.
Yeah, I started with Steve Kozak book, so I just got the other one Chris told me on Sunday.
Okay.
But
Cool.
I like how Steve does his because I watch him on the videos and then I follow through in the book.
Yep. Okay. Well, any other questions from the group? You're easily the best group on the entire Zoom call. What other questions do you have? Ron's even got on a tie. Hey, Don, you and Ron on my screen are on the side by side. So the third row down is all tied up.
Did we want to try and hit double back to Rebecca's question?
Which was?
About her meter.
What do you think, Rebecca?
Well, I think I should just go to my camera boys, my camera store guys, and just check my meter, because maybe my meter's reading wrong, because I've got my lowest ISO possible and I have my highest shutter speed possible. And these things are just, they're not invisible, but they're so bright. There's no way, and they're not going to work for image submission. There's no way they even look close to the sample images. And so I'm thinking that might be my answer, is either just get myself a new light meter or just go and check the one I have with my camera guys.
Well, one of the catches with your meter, I'm sorry.
Also check to see what ISO you're using when you initially set up your lights for F11 and 1.5 stops left.
Yeah, whatever the meter says, you got to set your camera to the same.
I'm setting it. Do I not set that?
We're not
you're
hitting...
using a low ISO setting when you initially set it, then you don't have enough room to go.
Okay, how do I do it? Do I raise my ISO?
Yeah, on your meter, in my case, I always start everything with ISO 400. So that gives me a couple of stops up, a couple of stops down, right?
Yep.
That gives that gap that Chuck was alluding to. So I can drop my camera if needed, right?
Okay.
And I'm just comfortable with F4. Could just easily been 5, 6, or 8 where you start from.
So going back to things that you need to look at when you're setting up your whole set, that is one of the things you need to think about for the whole project. You got to think about what ISO can I use at f16 and what ISO can I use at 5.6, and I need to meter at f11, so my end result needs to be able to encompass both of those ISOs. If your ISO at the 5.6 is all the way down at the bottom of the ISO range on your camera, then you're allowing in way too much light for your camera to work with.
And it's all about equivalent exposures, Rebecca. And
I totally get that, but I thought if I brought it as low as possible, but what you're saying is I need to not do that, and boy, that makes me look at it all differently. So
yeah, you don't have any room to go down, right?
From F11 is where you set your light.
Yep.
F5.6 is the lowest f-stop you're going to be using, the biggest aperture. Confusing, yes.
Right.
Okay, how many stops between F11 and F5.6?
2.
2. Okay, so you have to have, at a bare minimum, 2 stops of ISO to play with.
Okay.
I'd go with 3 or 4.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
I'll do that. I mean, I got to do something because it's just not working, and I've been, like I said, I've been working on it for a week. So.
My camera, the lowest my camera goes is ISO 100. So if I set F11 at ISO 200, I don't have 2 stops to go down.
Yep.
So it's going to be blown out.
Okay.
John is doing his very best mime there.
Yeah, so
I can't see him. I'm sorry.
Rebecca, instead of getting a new light meter or taking it to the camera store, if your light meter has an ambient setting, you can take a light reading with your light meter of a scene and light meter with your camera and see if they're in the ballpark.
Okay, I can do that.
Sunny 16 is the same whether it's the meter or the camera, right? That's kind of where you're going, John?
Well, I was just meaning that she has the light meter in her camera to check against the actual light meter. So
I could do that.
If you image the same scene with your light meter and your camera, you'll get a similar result because they're both looking at average intensity for the scene.
Hey guys, Ron's having trouble with the sun again, and I got to go.
Yep. Have a good Mr. Skip.
Yeah, my comment is if you take your gray card and you take your light meter and figure out what your f-stop is when you're exposing your gray card, and then you set your camera to that exposure setting, you should end up with a spike in your histogram right about the middle of the distribution.
Okay, and I do have that actually, and it's been worrying me. I'm glad to see that it's okay to have it a little higher.
Okay, well, what I mean is if you're really off, right, that spike will not be in the middle of the distribution. It'll be way one side or the other. And that'll give you an indicator as to whether your light meter is at least, in the ballpark of being, correct.
Okay. Yep.
The way you described that being totally blown out, it sounded like it's like really far off. So.
And I'm assuming that you have not adjusted your meter because that meter is adjustable.
I haven't touched it. Honestly, I haven't used the light meter a ton historically. So I was just assuming it was my own ignorance, and I didn't even consider that it was adjustable. I had no idea.
Well, one of the folks
the
that
308 was adjustable.
Yep.
Well,
well, not a 308, 358, and a 478. But no, what I was talking about is you can actually calibrate certain meters. Somebody else somebody else said something about that a while ago. But if you accidentally change that would not be a good thing. Okay. But right out of the box, at Texas School, one of my class sponsors was nice enough to come in with a bunch of meters, and people were taking a look at them right out of the box, and no two were exactly the same reading. So there's going to be a little bit of variance, and that's what these guys were alluding to. Go out on a sunny 16 day, take a reading. If it doesn't say sunny 16, well, it's not quite right. And then you might want to adjust it, right?
Okay. Helpful. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it a lot.
But if you're working with a 308, it's not adjustable.
Right. 358 and up.
Yes. Thank you.
But the 308 will work for it. That's what I have because I'm really cheap. I have the 308 and
it works fine.
It works fine.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I can at least go and check it. If it's not working properly, boy, that would be an answer, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, like I said, check how you're initially setting everything up to make sure that you have enough ISO to go up and down where you need it.
I will absolutely do that.
I made that mistake the first time I tried it. I set it where I normally do, and then when I went to go to 5.6, I didn't have enough adjustment room.
Hey, Don Davidson,
start all over again.
You passed the exam. What are you going to start your camera off at? What ISO were you going to start?
Well, you're all just confirming what I did this weekend.
Oh, okay. And that was what you started off at?
Because the only thing that you can change, everything else is set for you. The only variable you have to change is your ISO. So I had to start out at a much higher ISO on my Fuji for my initial first picture.
Yeah.
And then use the ISO to adjust.
Yeah, ISO and shutter speed are the only things that you can choose, and since you're using flash, shutter speed doesn't really matter that much.
Right. No. Because shutter speed's only going to really affect the ambient.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Your strobes are going to be your shutter speed.
All right.
Okay. So how we doing, Rebecca?
Good, sir.
Are you climbing down off the wall?
A little bit.
Sharp objects?
I'm further away from the cliff. Yes.
Okay. All right. Good.
We'll pull you in completely when we go over these.
Sounds great. I really appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
All right. It is 12:24. Chris, you got anything else?
No, I'm going to actually jump off here. I need a biological break before I meet with Deb Davis.
Okay. John Gaylor, were you waving or question?
I was waving goodbye and just letting you know I can't do our Thursday collaborative meeting, but I'll send an email as well. So I'll see you next week.
All right.
Don, what camera are you using, Don? Your picture looks so clear.
Oh, me?
Don,
you talking about for today's
Yeah.
Zoom? Yeah.
Yeah, for your Zoom, what camera are you using?
Don Davidson.
Oh, I've got I don't know, what's it called, a Razor? It's a portable webcam.
Is that going to be on the exam, Deb?
No, it just looks so clear.
A friend of mine uses his Sony, and it's it's like, whoa.
Is it a webcam?
The Sony? No, it's his actual DS.
What Don is using.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a webcam.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And it's called Razor?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. It looks
By the
nice.
way, Chuck and gang, did you guys notice she doesn't like our cameras? Oh, well, okay. All right.
No.
You guys are all
I got mine with
I like-
S&H green stamps. John Kennedy said that was the best camera out there.
See,
What
my
kind is
pop
that
the only-
guy?
with my camera, the only image she sees is me, so that shoots it down right there.
No.
And I'm using a Logitech to answer your question.
Logitech. Okay. That's a nice camera too. Is
I
it a
can't remember the
webcam?
model. Yes.
Okay.
It's sitting on top of my
Nice.
monitor. I can't remember which model it is, but
Okay. All right, guys. Bye, everybody.
Good
See
seeing
next
you.
week.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.